The steaming locomotive screeched to a halt at Laredo Station, Texas, sending clouds of billowing smoke into the crisp autumn air of 1875. Olivia Langley clutched her worn letter tightly, her knuckles white with anticipation as she peered through the dusty window, searching for the face of her future husband, a man she knew only through 6 months of correspondence and a faded daguerreotype. The porter called out, "Laredo, Texas. All passengers for Laredo, disembark now." His voice carried through the passenger car, startling Olivia from her nervous reverie. Gathering her small reticule and adjusting her navy traveling bonnet, Olivia rose on unsteady legs. At 22, she had left behind everything familiar, her small Maine hometown, her position as a schoolteacher, and the memory of her parents' graves for the promise of a new life with Mr. Edmund Blackwell, cattle rancher and her mail-order betrothed. "You need help with your trunk, miss?" the porter asked, eyeing the substantial wooden chest at her feet. "No, thank you," Olivia replied softly. My fiancé will assist me." The words felt foreign on her tongue. The platform bustled with activity as Olivia descended from the train, her trunk now deposited beside her. The Texas heat assaulted her immediately, so different from the cool northern climate she'd departed 3 days earlier. She stood still, eyes scanning the crowd for a tall man with a mustache and kind eyes, the man from the photograph. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The platform gradually emptied as travelers reunited with waiting families or moved on to their destinations. Olivia remained, her hope diminishing with each passing minute. "Mr. Blackwell," she ventured to ask a passing station master. "Edmund Blackwell. He was to meet the train from St. Louis." The older man frowned, adjusting his spectacles. "Blackwell, the rancher." At her nod, his expression darkened. "Miss, I'm afraid there was an incident 3 days back. Blackwell was thrown from his horse while chasing rustlers. Doc Simmons couldn't save him." The world seemed to tilt beneath Olivia's feet. "He's dead?" "Yes, madam. I'm mighty sorry to be the one to tell you." Olivia sank onto her trunk, the letter from Edmund crumpling in her hand. 3 days. If the accident had happened just 3 days earlier, she would have received word in time. Now she sat alone, 1,000 miles from home, without a penny to spare for return fare. The station master awkwardly tipped his hat. "Town's just up the road if you need accommodations, miss." As the sun began its westward descent, the platform emptied completely. Olivia remained, paralyzed by indecision and grief for a man she had never truly known. The station master had long since returned to his office, leaving her alone with the distant sound of a saloon piano drifting on the warm breeze. "Station closes at sundown, miss," called the porter, locking the ticket office door. "Can't stay here overnight." Tears threatened, but Olivia blinked them back. She would not cry. Not yet. Rising on unsteady feet, she gripped the handle of her trunk and attempted to drag it toward the road. The heavy chest barely budged. "Need a hand with that?" The deep voice startled her. Olivia turned to find a tall man watching her from the edge of the platform. His dark brown Stetson was pulled low, shadowing features bronzed by the Texas sun. A star-shaped badge glinted on his leather vest. Olivia's voice caught. "I'm afraid I have nowhere to take it." The man stepped closer, and Olivia noted his striking blue eyes, so vivid against his sun-darkened skin. He couldn't have been much older than 30. "Name's Quentin Nash," he said, removing his hat briefly. "Town marshal here in Laredo." His eyes took in her travel-worn appearance and the solitary trunk. "You waiting for someone, madam?" "I was." Olivia straightened her shoulders. "But it seems he's no longer able to receive me." Understanding dawned in the marshal's expression. "You'd be Blackwell's intended." Olivia nodded, Fighting another wave of tears, Marshal Nash sighed deeply, running a hand through dark hair streaked with early strands of silver at the temples. News travels fast in small towns. He glanced at her trunk, then back at her face. You got family back east you can return to? No, Olivia admitted. No family, and I spent my savings on the journey here. The marshal was quiet for a long moment, seemingly weighing options as the sun sank lower in the Texas sky. Then, with a decisive movement, he stepped forward and grasped the handle of her trunk, lifting it with ease. Stay, he said simply. Olivia blinked in surprise. I beg your pardon. Laredo's a good town with good people, he continued, his expression softening slightly. Mrs. Wilkins at the boarding house always needs help with the cooking and cleaning. The town could use another schoolteacher, too. He paused, seeming almost embarrassed by his own forwardness. What I mean to say is, you don't have to leave just because Blackwell's gone. For the first time since hearing the devastating news, Olivia felt a small flicker of hope. You would help me find a position. Why? Marshal Nash shifted the heavy trunk to his other hand. My mother came west as a mail-order bride 27 years ago. Her intended was killed in a bar fight before she arrived. Something in his eyes softened further. The town marshal helped her start over. Seems fitting I do the same. I don't know what to say, Olivia whispered. Say you'll stay, at least until you figure things out. He nodded toward the road leading into town. I can take you to the boarding house. Mrs. Wilkins is a good woman. She'll help you get settled. Olivia hesitated only a moment before nodding. What choice did she have? Thank you, Marshal Nash. Quentin, he corrected, a hint of a smile touching his lips. Everyone just calls me Quentin. As they walked the dusty road toward Laredo proper, Olivia felt both terrified and oddly relieved. This wasn't the arrival she had planned, but perhaps it was the arrival she needed. Beside her, Marshal Nash carried her trunk as if it weighed nothing, his steady presence already a comfort in this strange new world. Tell me, Miss Langley, she supplied. Olivia Langley. Tell me, Miss Langley, can you ride a horse? Olivia's brow furrowed. I'm afraid not. His mouth quirked in the barest suggestion of amusement. Well, that'll be the first thing to remedy if you're staying in Texas. Despite everything, Olivia found herself smiling. I suppose it will. The town of Laredo emerged before them, a collection of wooden buildings and adobe structures stretching along a wide main street. Lanterns were being lit in windows as twilight descended, and the distant strains of piano music grew louder. Welcome to Laredo, Quentin said, pausing to let her take in the sight. It ain't much compared to eastern cities, but we make do. Olivia took a deep breath of the unfamiliar Texas air. It's a new beginning, she murmured, and for that I'm grateful, Mrs. Wilkins proved to be exactly as Quentin had described, a robust, practical woman of about 50 with graying auburn hair and keen eyes that missed nothing. So you're Edmund's bride, she said after Quentin explained the situation. Poor girl. Well, you're welcome here as long as you need. I could use the help with the cooking, and Lord knows these cowboys could benefit from some refined company at the dinner table. The boarding house was a 2-story wooden structure with 8 guest rooms and a large communal dining room. It smelled of fresh bread and coffee, and despite her exhaustion, Olivia's stomach rumbled appreciatively. You must be famished after your journey, Mrs. Wilkins noted. Come have some supper while Marshal Nash brings your trunk up. Oh, I couldn't possibly, Olivia began to protest. It's no trouble, Quentin insisted, already heading for the stairs with her trunk. Second door on the right, Mrs. Wilkins. That's the one. It's small, but it'll do until we sort something more permanent. Over a simple but hearty meal of beef stew and fresh bread, Olivia learned that Quentin had been Marshal of Laredo for 5 years. Before that, he'd worked as a ranger, tracking outlaws across the Texas territory. Mrs. Wilkins spoke of him with obvious affection. "He's a good man," she told Olivia when Quentin stepped outside to speak with a passing deputy. "Keeps this town safe when others along the border have fallen to lawlessness. Never married, though. Too devoted to that badge, I reckon." Olivia found her gaze drawn to the marshal when he returned. There was something reassuring about his quiet confidence, the way he moved with purpose but without arrogance. His kindness to a stranded stranger spoke volumes about his character. Before departing, Quentin paused by Olivia's chair. "I'll come by tomorrow to see how you're settling in. Perhaps show you around town a bit if you're feeling up to it." "That would be most kind," Olivia replied, suddenly aware of how blue his eyes were, even in the lamplight. "Thank you again, Marshal. I mean, Quentin." His smile was brief but genuine. "Rest well, Miss Langley." That night, in the small but clean room at Mrs. Wilkins' boarding house, Olivia finally allowed herself to cry for the life she'd left behind, for the future she'd planned that would never be, and for the uncertainty that lay ahead. Yet as she drifted toward sleep, it was not Edmund Blackwell's face she saw in her mind, but the kind eyes of Marshal Quentin Nash as he lifted her trunk and simply said, "Stay." Morning arrived with the aroma of coffee and the sounds of boarders gathering for breakfast. Olivia dressed carefully in one of her few remaining clean dresses, a modest blue cotton with white trim, and pinned her chestnut hair into a simple chignon. The mirror reflected a woman with tired eyes but determined expression. "There you are, dear Mrs. Wilkins called as Olivia descended the stairs. "Come have some breakfast. We've got flapjacks and bacon this morning." The dining room held a mix of residents, 2 cattle buyers from San Antonio, a land surveyor, and 3 cowboys from nearby ranches who took rooms in town between cattle drives. All conversation halted momentarily as Olivia entered, and she felt her cheeks warm under their curious gazes. "Gentlemen, this is Miss Olivia Langley," Mrs. Wilkins announced. "She'll be staying with us for a while and helping me run this place, so mind your manners." A chorus of polite greetings followed, and Olivia managed a small smile as she took a seat at the table. "Terrible business about Edmund Blackwell," said one of the cattle buyers, an older man named Harrison. "Fine rancher, honest in his dealings." "Indeed," agreed the land surveyor, passing Olivia the plate of flapjacks. "His foreman's running the operation for now, until the bank decides what's to be done with the property." The conversation shifted to cattle prices and railroad schedules, allowing Olivia to eat in relative peace. She was finishing her coffee when a knock at the door announced Quentin's arrival. "Morning, Mrs. Wilkins," he greeted, hat in hand. "Miss Langley." Olivia found herself inexplicably pleased to see him. In daylight, she noticed details missed the previous evening: a small scar along his jawline, the way one corner of his mouth lifted slightly higher than the other when he smiled, the lean strength of his frame beneath the simple clothing of a lawman. "I've arranged for Miss Patterson at the Mercantile to meet with you," he explained as they walked down the boardwalk of Laredo's Main Street. "She mentioned needing help with inventory and ledgers, and Mayor Collins would like to discuss the possibility of reopening the schoolhouse come spring." "You've been quite busy on my behalf," Olivia observed, touched by his efforts. Quentin shrugged. "Small towns survive by looking after their own." "But I'm not one of your own," Olivia pointed out gently. "I'm a stranger." "Not anymore," he replied simply, tipping his hat to a passing matron. "Besides, any woman brave enough to travel across the country to marry a man she's never met deserves a little consideration." The observation wasn't meant unkindly, but Olivia felt compelled to defend her decision. It may seem foolish to you, but teaching opportunities for unmarried women in my hometown were limited. After my parents passed, I had few options. Quentin's expression softened. I didn't mean to judge, Miss Langley. Truth is, half the families in Texas got their start that way. My own mother included. What happened to her? Olivia asked, curious about the woman he'd mentioned. She made a life here, married the town doctor eventually. I was born a year later. His expression grew distant. They both passed during a cholera outbreak when I was 15. I went to live with my uncle in Austin after that. I'm sorry, Olivia said sincerely. Losing parents is difficult at any age. Quentin nodded in acknowledgement, then gestured toward a large building ahead. That's the Mercantile. Miss Patterson's expecting you. Abigail Patterson, proprietress of Laredo's largest general store, was a sharp-eyed woman of 30 with practical clothing and a no-nonsense manner. She eyed Olivia with frank assessment. Marshal Nash says you can cipher and keep books, she said without preamble. That true? Yes, madam, Olivia replied. I managed the accounts for my father's carpentry business before his passing, and I've had formal schooling. Can you start tomorrow? 8 sharp, Olivia blinked at the abruptness. Yes, I believe I can. Good. Pays $3 a week to start. If you prove yourself, we'll discuss a raise. Miss Patterson nodded curtly. See you tomorrow, Miss Langley. Outside, Quentin waited patiently. How did it go? I appear to be employed, Olivia said, still slightly dazed by the quick interview. Beginning tomorrow. Abigail doesn't waste words or time, Quentin said with a hint of amusement. But she's fair and honest. You'll do well there. The rest of the morning was spent in a similar fashion meeting Mayor Collins, who expressed great interest in having Olivia teach at the currently vacant schoolhouse. Being introduced to Dr. Simmons, who had attended Edmund Blackwell in his final hours, and touring the small church where Reverend Parker and his wife welcomed her warmly. By midday, Olivia's head was spinning with new faces and information. When Quentin suggested they take lunch at the small cafe near the courthouse, she gratefully accepted. Everyone has been so kind, she remarked as they settled at a corner table. I never expected such a welcome. Folks around here understand hardship, Quentin replied, ordering coffee for them both. And new settlers, especially women, are always welcome. Texas has more than its share of unmarried men. The observation hung between them, and Olivia found herself studying his left hand, noting the absence of a wedding band. Including yourself, Marshal? The question slipped out before she could reconsider its propriety. Quentin's eyebrow rose slightly, but he answered readily enough. Never found the time between ranger work and now the marshal's office. Or perhaps the right woman, Olivia suggested, immediately blushing at her boldness. His mouth quirked in that almost smile. Perhaps that too. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their meal, hearty beef stew, and corn bread that reminded Olivia she'd eaten little at breakfast. As they ate, Quentin pointed out various buildings visible through the window, explaining the town's history and growth since the end of the war. The railroad changed everything, he explained. Brought commerce, travelers, and unfortunately, a certain element of trouble, but we manage. Is it dangerous being Marshal? Olivia couldn't help asking, thinking of the star pinned to his vest. It has its moments, he admitted. But Laredo's generally peaceable compared to some border towns. We get the occasional drunken cowboy or cattle rustler, but nothing like the stories you probably heard back east. As they finished their meal, a commotion outside drew their attention. A man on horseback was racing down the main street, scattering pedestrians and chickens alike. "Excuse me," Quentin said, immediately on his feet. "Wait here." Olivia watched through the window as he stepped into the street, hand resting casually near his holstered revolver. The rider pulled his lathered horse to a halt before the marshal, gesturing wildly back in the direction he'd come. After a brief exchange, Quentin nodded grimly and returned to the cafe. "I'm afraid I need to cut our tour short," he said, dropping coins on the table for their meal. "There's been trouble at the Blackwell Ranch. Rustlers hit again last night and the foreman was shot." "Is he?" Olivia couldn't finish the question. "Alive, but in bad shape according to Young there," he nodded toward the rider. "I need to ride out with a posse." "Of course," Olivia said, rising quickly. "Please don't worry about me. I can find my way back to the boarding house." Quentin hesitated. "I don't like leaving you on your own your first day here." "I'll be fine," she assured him. "Your duty is more important." He studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "I'll stop by the boarding house when I return, even if it's late. Mrs. Wilkins will keep a lamp burning." With that, he was gone, striding purposefully toward the marshal's office. Olivia watched him gather several men, including the deputy she'd seen the previous night, before they all mounted horses and thundered out of town. The remainder of the day passed quietly. Olivia returned to the boarding house where Mrs. Wilkins put her to work immediately, kneading dough for the evening's bread and helping prepare vegetables for supper. The physical labor was welcome after the emotional turbulence of the past 24 hours. "Marshal Nash seems to have taken a particular interest in your situation," Mrs. Wilkins observed as they worked side by side in the kitchen. "He's been very kind," Olivia replied carefully. The older woman smiled knowingly. "He's not usually one to play guide to newcomers, usually sends deputy tourists for those duties." Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "I'm sure he's simply being considerate given my circumstances." "Of course," Mrs. Wilkins agreed, but her tone suggested she believed otherwise. "He's a good man, our Quentin. Too serious sometimes, but good to his core." The evening meal was served at 6 o'clock sharp, with all the boarders gathering around the long table. Conversation flowed freely, and Olivia found herself drawn into discussions about everything from local politics to the upcoming Harvest Festival. "Will you attend the festival, Miss Langley?" asked Mr. Harrison, the cattle buyer. "It's quite the social event in these parts." "I hadn't thought about it," Olivia admitted. The festival was still 3 weeks away and she'd scarcely planned beyond the next day. "Oh, you must go," insisted Mrs. Wilkins. "There's dancing and food and a proper gathering of all the county families. Best way to meet everyone." The idea of a community celebration was appealing, though Olivia wondered at the propriety of attending social functions so soon after learning of her fiancé's death. While she hadn't known Edmund personally, they had exchanged enough letters to form a connection, and his death had upended her carefully laid plans. As evening deepened into night, Olivia found herself watching the window, waiting for some sign of the marshal's return. It was nearly 10 o'clock when Mrs. Wilkins touched her shoulder gently. "Best get some rest, dear. The marshal might not return until morning if they're tracking those rustlers." Reluctantly, Olivia retired to her room, though sleep proved elusive. Her mind raced with thoughts of her new circumstances, the jobs awaiting her, and most persistently the kind blue eyes of Marshal Nash. A soft knock at her door startled her from her ruminations. Hastily donning a dressing gown over her nightdress, she opened the door to find Mrs. Wilkins. "The marshal's back," the older woman said quietly. "He's waiting downstairs if you'd like to speak with him." Olivia hesitated, conscious of the impropriety of receiving a gentleman visitor in her nightclothes, even with Mrs. Wilkins as chaperone. "Tell him I'll be down directly," she decided, closing the door to quickly change back into her day dress. When she descended the stairs minutes later, she found Quentin standing by the hearth, his expression weary but alert. A smudge of dirt marked his cheek, and his clothes bore evidence of hard riding. "I apologize for the late hour," he said as she approached. "I wanted to let you know we found the Rustlers, a gang that's been operating out of Mexico. They wounded Blackwell's foreman when he caught them driving off a dozen head of cattle." "Will he recover?" Olivia asked, genuinely concerned. "Dr. Simmons thinks so, though he'll be laid up for some time." Quentin ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "There's something else you should know. While we were at the ranch, I spoke with the bank representative who's handling Blackwell's estate." Olivia tensed, unsure what this might mean for her. "It seems Blackwell named you in his will," Quentin continued. "He must have added the provision after your engagement was confirmed." "Me?" Olivia's surprise was genuine. "But we never even met." Nevertheless, he left instructions that should anything happen to him before the marriage took place, you were to receive a small house on the edge of his property and a modest stipend from the ranch proceeds. Olivia sank into the nearest chair, overwhelmed by this unexpected development. "I don't understand. Why would he do such a thing? His letter to the bank manager mentioned wanting to ensure your security, even if fate prevented your union." Quentin's expression softened. "It seems he was a man of honor." Tears pricked Olivia's eyes. The Edmund Blackwell she'd come to know through their correspondence had indeed seemed honorable and thoughtful. This final gesture confirmed her impression of him. "The house isn't large," Quentin continued, "but it's solidly built. 2 rooms with a proper stone hearth. There's a small garden plot, too, already planted with winter vegetables." "I don't know what to say," Olivia murmured. "I never expected." "You don't have to decide anything tonight," he assured her. "The property is yours regardless. You can choose to live there, sell it, or rent it out while you stay in town. The bank will handle the details of the stipend, which isn't a fortune but would supplement whatever you earn." Mrs. Wilkins, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "It's a fine opportunity, Olivia. Your own home and a bit of independence that's more than most women ever see, especially out here." Olivia nodded slowly, still processing the news. "When might I see this house?" "I could take you tomorrow afternoon after you finish at the Mercantile," Quentin offered. "I would appreciate that," Olivia replied. As Quentin prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "Miss Patterson starts work early. I'll have Deputy Torres stop by to escort you to the Mercantile in the morning." "That's very thoughtful, but I'm sure I can find my way," Olivia protested. "It's just down the street." "Humor me," Quentin said, that almost smile appearing briefly. "It's my job to look after the citizens of Laredo." After he departed, Mrs. Wilkins gave Olivia a knowing look. "Citizens, indeed. I've known that man for 5 years, and I've never seen him so attentive to anyone's welfare." Olivia tried to dismiss the observation, but as she returned to her room, she couldn't help but feel a small thrill at the thought. It had been less than 2 days since she arrived in Laredo, abandoned and alone. Now she had employment, the prospect of a teaching position, a house of her own, and most surprisingly the attentions of a man whose quiet strength and kindness appealed to her more than she cared to admit. As promised, Deputy Torres arrived promptly at 7:30 the following morning to escort Olivia to the Mercantile. Miguel Torres was a friendly young man who chatted easily about the town and its inhabitants as they walked. "Marshal Nash, he is a good man," the deputy said at one point. "Very fair, very honest. He teach me much about being lawman." "You've worked with him long?" Olivia inquired. 3 years now. Before I was just ranch hand. But Marshal, he sees something in me, give me chance as deputy." Torres smiled proudly. "My mother, she worry about danger, but Marshal say we make difference in town, keep people safe." The Mercantile was already bustling when they arrived. Miss Patterson immediately put Olivia to work organizing the store's account ledgers, which had fallen into disarray over the summer months. "Previous clerk left to get married," she explained tersely. "Been trying to manage it myself, but with shipments coming in for harvest season, I'm falling behind." The work suited Olivia perfectly. She'd always had an aptitude for mathematics and organization, and by midday she had already made considerable progress in reconciling the jumbled accounts. "You'll do," Miss Patterson declared during their brief lunch break, which was as close to praise as she seemed capable of offering. "Come back tomorrow, same time." True to his word, Quentin appeared at the mercantile just as Olivia was finishing her first day's work. "Ready to see your inheritance?" he asked, helping her with her shawl. "I admit I'm curious," Olivia replied, following him outside where 2 horses waited. "Oh, I mentioned I don't ride. Old Bessie here is gentle as a lamb," Quentin assured her, patting the smaller of the 2 horses, a placid-looking dun mare. "And it's only about 2 miles to the property." With considerable trepidation, Olivia allowed him to help her mount, trying to ignore the warmth of his hands at her waist as he lifted her into the saddle. "Keep your heels down and hold the reins loosely," he instructed, adjusting her posture slightly. "Bessie knows the way. She'll follow my horse." The ride was less terrifying than Olivia had anticipated. Bessie indeed seemed content to plod along behind Quentin's more spirited gelding, and the Texas countryside revealed itself in rolling vistas of mesquite and oak. "The Blackwell Ranch proper is another 3 miles beyond your property," Quentin explained as they rode. "Good land, well watered. Your plot has access to the same creek that runs through the main ranch. Have you lived in Laredo all your life?" Olivia asked, curious about the man who had so quickly become her guide to this new world. "No, I grew up near Austin with my parents. After they died, I went to live with my uncle who was a ranger, followed in his footsteps for a time before settling here." He glanced back at her. "What about you?" "You mentioned Maine." "Yes, a small coastal town called Camden. My father was a carpenter, my mother a midwife." Olivia's voice softened with memories. "They both contracted influenza 2 winters ago. After they were gone, I took a position teaching at the local school, but when the headmaster's daughter came of age, she was given my post." "So you answered Blackwell's advertisement," Olivia nodded. "It seemed like Providence at the time. His letters were kind and intelligent. He described Texas as a land of opportunity." "It can be," Quentin agreed, "for those willing to work hard and face a few challenges." They crested a small rise and Quentin pointed ahead. "There it is, your new home if you want it." The house came into view, a modest stone structure nestled against a stand of live oaks. A small creek gurgled nearby, and a fenced garden patch showed signs of recent tending. It wasn't grand by any measure, but to Olivia's eyes, it was perfect. "It's lovely," she breathed, genuine pleasure in her voice. Quentin helped her dismount, his hands lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary at her waist. He tied both horses to a hitching post near the front door. "Blackwell built this place for his sister when she was widowed a few years back," he explained as they approached. "She remarried last year and moved to Dallas, so it's been empty since then. The ranch hands check on it regularly, though." The interior was simple but well-crafted, a main room with a stone fireplace and cast iron stove, a smaller bedroom behind a sturdy door, and basic furniture including a table, 2 chairs, a dresser, and a narrow bed. "It needs a woman's touch," Quentin observed as Olivia explored the space. "But the roof doesn't leak, and the chimney draws well." Olivia ran her fingers along the smooth wooden table, imagining meals prepared here, perhaps flowers in a vase by the window. "It's more than I ever expected to have of my own." You like it then? Very much, she confirmed, meeting his gaze with a smile that reached her eyes for perhaps the first time since arriving in Texas. Something shifted in Quentin's expression, a softening, a warmth that hadn't been there before. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the small house quiet around them. The spell was broken by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Quentin moved to the window, hand automatically dropping to his revolver. "It's Rodriguez, one of Blackwell's hands," he said, relaxing his stance. "Probably checking on the place." The ranch hand, a weathered man in his 40s, tipped his hat respectfully when Quentin introduced Olivia as the property's new owner. "We've been keeping an eye on it, madam," he explained. "Tending the garden some, making sure no varmints take up residence." "I appreciate your care," Olivia said sincerely, "though I'm not yet certain when I'll be moving in." "No rush," Rodriguez assured her. "Place isn't going anywhere." He turned to Quentin. "Marshal, there's news from town. Messenger rode out to the main ranch looking for you." "Seems there's been some trouble at the saloon," Quentin sighed, his duty clearly calling him back. "We should return to town," he told Olivia. "I'll have Rodriguez escort you if you'd like to stay longer." "No, I should get back as well," she decided. "Mrs. Wilkins is expecting my help with supper." The ride back to Laredo was quicker, with Olivia feeling slightly more confident in the saddle. As they approached the town, she found herself reluctant for their time together to end. "Thank you for showing me the house," she said as Quentin helped her dismount in front of the boarding house. "And for everything else you've done since my arrival." "It's nothing," he replied, though his eyes suggested otherwise. "I'll be tied up with whatever's happening at the saloon, but perhaps tomorrow." "I'd like that," Olivia said, before he could even finish the invitation. The smile that spread across his face transformed his serious features, making him appear younger and almost boyish. "Tomorrow, then." "Good evening, Miss Langley." "Olivia," she corrected gently. "Please call me Olivia." "Olivia," he repeated, the name sounding different in his deep voice. "Good evening." She watched him ride toward the saloon, where a small crowd had gathered outside. Only when he disappeared from view did she enter the boarding house, her mind full of stone cottages, garden plots, and the way Quentin Nash's eyes crinkled when he truly smiled. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity and new experiences. Olivia quickly proved herself indispensable at the mercantile, transforming its chaotic bookkeeping system into a model of efficiency. Miss Patterson, grudgingly impressed, increased her wages to $4 a week by the end of the first fortnight. In the evenings, Olivia assisted Mrs. Wilkins at the boarding house, learning to cook Southwestern dishes that were a far cry from New England fare. The work was satisfying, the company pleasant, and if she occasionally found herself watching the door for a certain tall marshal, she tried not to dwell on the implications. True to his word, Quentin made time for her almost daily, despite his busy schedule. Sometimes it was just a brief visit to the mercantile or the boarding house, other times longer excursions teaching her to ride properly, escorting her to Sunday services, or taking her to her little house to begin making it truly her own. They talked easily, discovering shared interests in literature and history. Quentin had received more formal education than most men in his position, having attended a proper school in Austin until his parents' deaths. Olivia found his mind as appealing as his quiet strength and unwavering integrity. "You should consider my offer to teach," Mayor Collins reminded her one Sunday after church. "The children need schooling, and your qualifications are excellent." "I'm still contemplating it," Olivia replied truthfully. "Perhaps after the Harvest Festival, when I'm more settled." The festival had become a focal point for the town as October progressed. Decorations appeared on storefronts, Ladies discussed dresses and baking competitions, and the menfolk prepared for various contests of skill and strength. "Will you save me a dance at the festival?" Quentin asked one evening as he walked Olivia back from visiting her property, where they'd spent the afternoon planting flower bulbs for spring. Her heart fluttered at the request. "I'd be honored," she replied, trying to sound composed. "Though I should warn you, I'm not especially accomplished." "That makes two of us," he admitted with a chuckle. "But I reckon we can manage not to trample each other too badly." Their growing closeness did not go unnoticed in the small community. Mrs. Wilkins made knowing remarks. Miss Patterson rolled her eyes whenever Quentin appeared at the store, and Deputy Torres grinned widely whenever he saw them together. Even Reverend Parker had taken to including meaningful glances their way during sermons touching on matrimony. Olivia tried to temper her feelings, reminding herself that she'd come to Texas to marry another man, a man only recently deceased. Yet with each passing day, her grief for Edmund Blackwell transformed from personal loss to a more generalized sympathy for a good man who had died too young. Her heart, she was discovering, belonged increasingly to the quiet lawman who had lifted her trunk and simply said stay when she'd had nowhere else to go. The night before the Harvest Festival, Olivia made a decision. After helping Mrs. Wilkins with the evening meal, she asked to speak privately with her landlady. "I've decided to move into the house Mr. Blackwell left me," she announced once they were alone in the kitchen. "After the festival, if that seems appropriate." Mrs. Wilkins studied her thoughtfully. "It's a fine house, but it's isolated." "You're sure about this?" "I am," Olivia confirmed. "I appreciate all your kindness, but I need to establish my independence here. And," she hesitated, "I've decided to accept the teaching position as well. Mayor Collins says the schoolhouse can be ready by November." "Well now," Mrs. Wilkins said, her expression brightening. "That's wonderful news about the teaching. The town needs a proper schoolmistress." She paused, then added more carefully, "And what does the marshal think of your plans to move to that remote cottage?" Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "I haven't discussed it with him yet." Was all Mrs. Wilkins said, but her expression spoke volumes. The Harvest Festival dawned clear and crisp, with just enough autumn chill to justify woolen shawls but plenty of sunshine to warm the town square where the celebration would take place. Olivia had spent precious dollars on a new dress for the occasion, a deep green calico with a fitted bodice and full skirt that complemented her chestnut hair and hazel eyes. "My, don't you look lovely?" Mrs. Wilkins exclaimed as Olivia descended the stairs. "That color suits you beautifully." "Thank you," Olivia replied, unaccustomed to fussing over her appearance but pleased with the results nonetheless. "Is it appropriate? Not too forward?" "It's perfect," the older woman assured her. "Dignified enough for our new schoolmistress, but pretty enough to catch a certain marshal's eye." The town square had been transformed with autumn decorations. Cornstalks, pumpkins, and colorful bunting adorned every available surface. Tables laden with food lined one side, while a wooden platform for dancing dominated the center. Already, families were gathering, children running excitedly between displays of handicrafts and games. Olivia helped Mrs. Wilkins set up her contribution to the feast: 3 pumpkin pies and a large pot of chicken stew, before allowing herself to wander through the festivities. She greeted acquaintances, admired handcrafted quilts and preserves entered in competitions, and watched with amusement as local men tested their strength in a log-splitting contest. "Miss Langley," Mayor Collins hailed her, approaching with a matronly woman in tow. "Allow me to introduce my wife, Dorothea. She's most eager to meet our new schoolmistress." Word of Olivia's acceptance had apparently spread quickly. Throughout the morning, parents approached to introduce themselves and their children, all expressing delight at the prospect of regular schooling resuming. Olivia found herself genuinely excited about the role, envisioning lessons and activities for pupils of varying ages. It was nearly noon when she caught sight of Quentin, standing tall at the edge of the square in conversation with several ranchers. He wore a clean white shirt under a dark vest, his usual worn Stetson replaced with a newer one for the occasion. Even from a distance, he cut an impressive figure. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, eyes scanning the crowd until they found her. The smile that spread across his face sent warmth cascading through her despite the October breeze. Excusing himself from the ranchers, Quentin made his way toward her, navigating through the festive crowd with easy grace. "Olivia," he greeted, removing his hat briefly. "You look—" He paused, seeming to search for an adequate word, "beautiful." "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy under his appreciative gaze. "You look quite handsome yourself." A touch of color appeared above his tanned cheeks. "Been saving this shirt for special occasions. Figured today qualified." Before she could respond, the mayor's voice boomed across the square, calling everyone to gather for the official opening of the festival. As the crowd assembled, Quentin offered Olivia his arm, which she accepted with a small thrill of pleasure. The festivities proceeded with speeches, blessing of the harvest, and the commencement of various competitions. Children raced in sack races, women were judged on their preserves and needlework, and men competed in tests of marksmanship and horsemanship. "Aren't you participating?" Olivia asked Quentin as they watched the shooting contest begin. "I'm disqualified from most competitions," he replied with a wry smile. "Town marshal winning everything wouldn't be good for morale." "That confident in your abilities, are you?" she teased. "Let's just say I've had more practice than most," he returned, eyes twinkling. "Though I might try my hand at the horseshoes later. Deputy Torres thinks he can best me this year." As afternoon mellowed toward evening, lanterns were lit around the square and the fiddlers began tuning their instruments for dancing. Tables were moved aside to create more room, and couples began to gather in anticipation. "I believe you promised me a dance," Quentin reminded Olivia as the first chords of music filled the air. "So I did," she agreed, her heart quickening as he led her toward the wooden platform. Their first dance was a lively Virginia reel that left little opportunity for conversation, but plenty of chances for exchanged glances and brief touches. As they moved through the patterns, Quentin proved more graceful than he'd claimed, guiding Olivia confidently through steps that were familiar enough from dances back east. When the music shifted to a slower waltz, Quentin drew her closer, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers properly. "I've been meaning to ask," he said as they moved in gentle circles. "Have you decided about the teaching position?" "I have," Olivia replied. "I told Mayor Collins I would begin in November." His face brightened. "That's wonderful news. The town needs a good teacher and you'll be perfect for it." "I've also decided to move into the house," she added, watching his reaction carefully. "After the festival." Quentin's steps faltered momentarily before he recovered. "That's quite isolated out there," he said, echoing Mrs. Wilkins' concern. "You're sure about that?" "I am," Olivia confirmed. "It's a lovely home and it's mine. I need to establish my independence here in Laredo." He was quiet for several turns around the floor, his expression thoughtful. "I understand," he said finally, "but I'd feel better knowing you weren't completely alone out there." "Are you volunteering to be my neighbor, Marshal Nash?" The words slipped out more flirtatiously than she'd intended. His eyes darkened slightly. "I'd be more than your neighbor if you'd allow it, Olivia." The directness of his response took her breath away. "What are you saying, Quentin?" The music ended before he could answer, and they found themselves standing still amidst moving couples as the next dance began. "Come walk with me," he asked, offering his arm once more. Olivia nodded, her heart pounding as he led her away from the crowd toward the quieter edge of the square where cottonwood trees provided privacy in the gathering twilight. "I know it's soon," Quentin began once they were alone. "You came here to marry another man, and you've barely had time to settle in Laredo." "Quentin," she started, but he raised a hand gently. "Please let me finish while I have the courage." He took a deep breath. "From the moment I saw you standing alone at that train station, something inside me knew. I didn't understand it then, why I felt so compelled to help you, why I couldn't bear the thought of you leaving." Olivia's breath caught as he took her hands in his. "These past weeks, getting to know you, seeing your strength and kindness and intelligence, I've never met anyone like you, Olivia. I know it's fast and I know you need time, but I want you to know my intentions." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "I'm falling in love with you. And when you're ready, if you ever are, I'd be honored if you'd consider me as more than just the marshal who carried your trunk." Tears pricked Olivia's eyes at the sincerity in his voice. "Oh, Quentin," she whispered, "you've been so much more than that from the very beginning." Hope flickered across his features. "Does that mean—" "It means I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted, her voice steady despite the emotion welling within her. "I never expected it, never thought I could feel this way so quickly. But everything changed the moment you said stay that first day." The relief and joy that spread across Quentin's face was a sight Olivia knew she would treasure forever. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he raised one hand to cup her cheek. "May I?" he asked softly. At her nod, he lowered his head and kissed her gently at first, then with growing confidence as she responded. It was everything a first kiss should be: tender, sweet, and full of promise. When they finally parted, Quentin rested his forehead against hers. "I don't want to rush you," he murmured. "We can take all the time you need." "I appreciate that," Olivia replied honestly. "I do want some time to establish myself here as a teacher in my own home, but I don't want to wait too long either." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "How about a compromise? You move into your house as planned, start teaching, and I'll court you properly. When the time feels right, we'll take the next step." "That sounds perfect," Olivia agreed. They returned to the festival hand in hand, both glowing with newfound happiness. If the townspeople noticed, and judging by Mrs. Wilkins' knowing smile, they certainly did, no one seemed surprised by this development. The following weeks unfolded like a dream. Olivia moved into her stone cottage, making it truly her own with simple touches: curtains sewn from fabric purchased at the mercantile, wildflowers in jars on the table, a colorful quilt on the narrow bed. The garden yielded late vegetables, and she learned to cook on the cast iron stove with Rodriguez's wife Maria, patiently teaching her the secrets of Mexican cuisine. The schoolhouse opened in early November with 15 pupils ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. Olivia found teaching deeply satisfying, especially watching the children's excitement as they mastered new concepts. True to his word, Quentin courted her properly. He rode out to her cottage several evenings a week, sometimes bringing small gifts: a book of poetry, a jar of honey from a local beekeeper, wildflower seeds for her garden. On Sundays, they attended church together, afterwards taking long rides through the countryside or sharing dinner at the boarding house. Their relationship deepened with each passing day, built on mutual respect, shared values, and growing affection. Quentin confided his hopes and fears about keeping the peace in a changing Texas, while Olivia shared stories of her life in Maine and her dreams for the school. By Christmas, The entire town seemed to be watching their courtship with collective approval. The holiday brought a small celebration at the schoolhouse, a larger gathering at the church, and an intimate dinner at Olivia's cottage, where Quentin presented her with a hand-carved jewelry box. "It's beautiful," she exclaimed, running her fingers over the intricate pattern of leaves and flowers on the lid. "Did you make this?" "My father taught me carpentry before he died," Quentin explained, pleased by her reaction. "I'm not as skilled as he was, but I remember enough." Olivia's gift to him, a knitted scarf in deep blue that matched his eyes, seemed humble by comparison, but his genuine appreciation warmed her heart. As they sat before the fire that Christmas evening, Olivia realized how completely her life had transformed in just 3 months. From desolation at the train depot to contentment in her own home, from stranger to respected teacher, from abandoned bride to woman in love, the journey seemed almost miraculous. "What are you thinking?" Quentin asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "About how differently things turned out than I expected," she replied honestly. "When I stepped off that train and learned Edmund was dead, I thought my life was over before it had truly begun. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else but here." Quentin's arm tightened around her shoulders. "I thank God every day that you stayed," he said softly. Winter deepened, bringing occasional icy weather that made the ride to town treacherous. During one particularly bad spell in January, Quentin insisted on escorting Olivia to and from school daily, unwilling to let her make the journey alone. "You can't keep this up," she protested one evening as they stamped snow from their boots at her door. "It's an hour out of your day twice a day." "I don't mind," he insisted. "Besides, it gives me more time with you." Olivia shook her head fondly as she prepared coffee. "You're a stubborn man, Quentin Nash." "Only about things that matter," he replied, watching her move around the small kitchen with obvious admiration. That night, as a rare Texas blizzard howled outside, Quentin reluctantly prepared to leave despite Olivia's concerns about the weather. "I can't stay," he said regretfully. "It wouldn't be proper. Since when has the Marshal of Laredo been so concerned with propriety?" she teased, though she understood his reasoning. He cupped her face gently. "Since he fell in love with a lady schoolteacher whose reputation matters to him." His kiss was tender but brief. "I'll see you in the morning." But morning brought knee-deep snow and news that Quentin had barely made it back to town, his horse foundering in a drift before Deputy Torres found them and helped them the rest of the way. When the roads finally cleared 2 days later, Olivia was waiting at the schoolhouse door when Quentin arrived to escort her home. "You could have been killed in that storm," she said without preamble, her worry evident. "I'm fine," he assured her, though the shadows under his eyes suggested the ordeal had been worse than reported. "This is ridiculous," Olivia declared as they rode toward her cottage. "We can't keep doing this." Quentin's expression fell slightly. "If you'd rather I didn't escort you, that's not what I meant," she interrupted. "I meant this us living separately, you risking your life riding through blizzards, all for the sake of propriety." He reined his horse to a stop, staring at her. "Olivia, what are you saying?" She met his gaze steadily. "I'm saying I don't want to wait anymore. I'm saying I love you, Quentin Nash, and life is too short and too precious to waste a single day we could have together." For a moment, he seemed frozen in surprise. Then a slow smile spread across his face, not the almost smile she'd first known, but the full, transformative one that reached his eyes and lightened his entire countenance. "Are you proposing to me, Miss Langley?" he asked, a hint of teasing in his tone despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "I believe I am," she replied, suddenly breathless. "Unless you'd prefer to do the asking." In answer, Quentin dismounted in one fluid movement, then reached up to help her down as well. Standing in the snow-covered road, he took both her hands in his. "I had a speech prepared," he admitted. "Was planning to ask you come spring when the wildflowers bloom near your cottage. Had it all planned out." "You can still give me the speech," Olivia offered, her heart pounding with joy and anticipation. "No need," he said simply. "All that matters is this: I love you, Olivia Langley." "Will you marry me?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes, with all my heart." His kiss was different this time, deeper, full of promise and passion long restrained. When they finally parted, both breathless, Quentin pressed his forehead to hers. "How soon?" he asked, his voice husky. "As soon as Reverend Parker can arrange it," Olivia replied decisively. "I'm tired of goodbyes at the doorstep." They were married 2 weeks later in the small stone church of Laredo, with the entire town turning out to witness the union of their marshal and schoolteacher. Mrs. Wilkins wept openly. Deputy Torres beamed with pride as Quentin's best man, and Miss Patterson actually smiled when Olivia tossed her bouquet directly into the storekeeper's startled hands. That evening, Quentin carried Olivia across the threshold of her cottage, their home, now his expression a mixture of joy and disbelief. "I still can't quite believe you're my wife," he confessed as they stood in the warm glow of the hearth. "Believe it," Olivia whispered, reaching up to trace the beloved contours of his face. "I'm not going anywhere." His arms tightened around her. "That's good," he murmured against her hair, "because I intend to keep you forever." Spring brought new beginnings. The garden around their cottage burst into bloom. The school flourished under Olivia's guidance, and the town of Laredo prospered in the peace maintained by its dedicated marshal. In May, when the wildflowers painted the Texas hills in vibrant colors, Olivia shared the news she'd suspected for several weeks. "A baby." Quentin's voice was hushed with wonder as he placed a gentle hand over her still flat stomach. "You're certain, Doctor?" "Simmons confirmed it yesterday," she replied, covering his hand with her own. "He expects a Christmas child." The joy that illuminated Quentin's face was all the response she needed. That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, he whispered plans and dreams for their growing family, a larger home eventually, perhaps on land adjoining their current property, room for children to run and play, a legacy to build together. Their son, Samuel Thomas Nash, arrived 2 days after Christmas, a healthy, robust boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined chin. Holding him for the first time, Olivia marveled at how completely her life had transformed since that fateful October day when she had stood alone at Laredo Station. "He's perfect," Quentin whispered, gazing in awe at the tiny bundle in his wife's arms. "He is," Olivia agreed, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain such happiness. As Samuel grew, so did their family and their ties to the community. Olivia continued teaching until the birth of their daughter Elizabeth Marie 2 years later, then divided her time between motherhood and tutoring advanced students at home. Quentin remained marshal, his reputation for fairness and integrity spreading throughout the county and beyond. Their stone cottage expanded to accommodate their growing family, first with an additional bedroom, then a larger kitchen, and eventually a proper study where Olivia could conduct her lessons. The garden flourished under her careful tending, providing vegetables for their table and flowers for their home year-round. 10 years after that first meeting at the train depot, as they celebrated their anniversary with a picnic near the creek where wildflowers still bloomed in profusion, Quentin presented Olivia with a small box. "What's this?" she asked, surprised by the unexpected gift. "Open it," he encouraged, watching her face with obvious anticipation. Inside lay a delicate silver locket. When opened, It revealed a tiny photograph of their family on one side and an inscription on the other. "Stay, the best word I ever spoke." Tears filled Olivia's eyes as Quentin fastened the locket around her neck. "It's beautiful," she whispered, "and true." Their children played nearby. Samuel, now a sturdy 9-year-old with his father's love of horses and the outdoors. Elizabeth, a spirited 7-year-old who already showed signs of her mother's intelligence and love of books. And 3-year-old James Robert, who toddled after his siblings with determined steps. "Did I ever tell you," Quentin said as they watched their children, "that I almost sent Deputy Torres to meet your train that day?" Olivia looked at him in surprise. "No, you never mentioned that." "I had a stack of reports to complete," he explained. "Was going to send Miguel in my place, but something told me to go myself." He shook his head wonderingly. "Best decision I ever made." "For both of us," Olivia agreed, leaning into his embrace. "I sometimes wonder what would have happened if Edmund had lived, if I had married him as planned." "You would have made him a good wife," Quentin said generously. "He was a decent man." "Yes," she acknowledged, "but my heart wouldn't have been as full as it is with you." She turned to face him, placing her hand against his cheek as she had countless times over the years. "This is where I was meant to be, Quentin. With you." His kiss was as tender as their first, yet deepened by years of shared love and life together. "I'm grateful every day that you stayed," he murmured against her lips. As the Texas sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting golden light across the land they had come to love, Olivia Nash looked at her family, the strong, honorable man who had become her husband and the beautiful children they had created together, and felt complete. From abandoned bride to beloved wife, from stranger to cornerstone of the community, her journey had begun with a simple word from a kind-hearted lawman: "Stay." And she had never regretted it for a moment.